Hey, my friend, and welcome to Aligned to Rise, the podcast for ambitious women who are ready to rise above their symptoms, release old limitations, and fully rise into their true power and potential. I'm your host, Alyssa Chavez, functional nutritionist, performance coach, and former endo and infertility warrior who knows what it's like to feel held back by your body and your beliefs. I've taken a journey of true healing from the inside out so that I can show up feeling great in my body, confident and unstoppable. And now I'm here to help you do the same. Through a blend of functional nutrition and deep mindset work, this show will empower you to reclaim your vitality, trust your intuition, and live unapologetically in your purpose. If you're ready to align your body, mind, and spirit so you can rise to your highest potential, you're in the right place. Let's rise, my friend. This show was created for educational purposes only and should not be used as a replacement for medical advice or treatment. Hey, my friend, and welcome back to the podcast. So, I am thrilled to have on the podcast today our special guest, Jennifer Edmonds. I absolutely love her work. I've been following her for quite some time and just knew that I had to have her on the podcast. So, if you haven't followed Jennifer before, she is a yoga, Pilates, meditation, and breathwork teacher who specializes in fertility and women's health. She actually had a long and difficult fertility journey of her own, which I know she's going to share more about in this episode. But she ended up finding the practice of fertility yoga, and that was actually able to help to ease her anxiety while she was trying to conceive, helped to relieve some chronic insomnia that she had going on, helped her to rebalance a thyroid condition that she had going on, and eventually she was able to even get pregnant naturally. So she now helps other people through the same process through her business, Element Pilates and Yoga, where she actually helps women all over the world to overcome fertility challenges and find their way to motherhood, which if you followed me for any length of time, you know that that's something very near and dear to my heart. I had quite a long and challenging fertility journey myself, and so I absolutely love connecting with other women who have walked this journey, who work in this space, and who also help other women who are struggling with these things, because it is such a challenging journey and one that you definitely don't want to go alone. So I'm so excited to share Jennifer Edmonds' journey today, and I'm going to let her take it away. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here today, Jen. I am just thrilled to have you be a part of the podcast and to share your story and your knowledge and all of your years of experience you have in the world of fertility. So just a huge thank you for being here today.
Oh, thank you, Alyssa, for inviting me. It's such an honor.
Good, good. Well, I would love to start off if we can just get to know you a little bit, just hear a little bit about your journey, the beautiful work that you do, but also just the story that led you to where you are today and how you came to be doing what you're doing. I would love to hear all of it.
Of course. Well, for context, my name's Jen. I live in Sydney in Australia. I run a business called Element Pilates and Yoga, which mainly focuses on supporting women who are trying to conceive, those who have been through pregnancy loss, those who are going through treatments, and then I support my students through their pregnancy and postpartum journeys as well. But that wasn't always the work that I did. Never in a million years could I have thought that I would be this person supporting women who were struggling with fertility. But I got married when I was 33, and we had no inkling that we'd have trouble conceiving. None at all. We were both healthy, we were relatively young in the scheme of things. I went off birth control and my cycle never returned. And fast forward about 6 months after this happened, I went back to my doctor and she said, look, it's not unusual that it takes a few months sometimes for women's bodies and hormones to rebalance. Don't worry about it. Just keep waiting. I'm sure it'll be fine. So then it got to about the 18-month mark and we started to get quite worried. And I had gone down the natural health fertility route a little bit as well. I tried acupuncture and some Chinese medicine herbs and a few supplements and nothing seemed to get my cycle to start again. So my doctor said, well, I think you're going to have to go and see a fertility doctor. And they ran a few more tests. And I remember going back in to this guy's office and he didn't really say anything. We sat down and he sort of had this like grim look on his face and he just slid this piece of paper across at me. And I looked at it and I was like, what is this? I don't know what this is meaning to tell me. And he said, well, we think you've gone through early menopause. I'm sorry, but I think your only option of having a baby is to go through IVF and you need to do it straight away. And I was pretty devastated and surprised, and I had no idea that this was even possible. I guess I was 34 by this stage, and I thought, well, my mum went through menopause when she was 50. It's not like something that had ever really been on the cards. So we were pretty shocked, but by this stage we were getting pretty desperate, and it was nice to have someone say, well, actually, here's something you can go and do. So I thought, great, we'll just do IVF. We'll just have the baby and then we will just move on. So we did, and I didn't respond to the medications at all, not even a little bit. And every time I went in for a scan, every couple of days, they'd keep upping my dose and upping my meds. And after 2 weeks, I hadn't even grown one follicle. And for anyone who hasn't been through IVF, that's bad. That's not great. So I had to have that cycle cancelled. And the doctor said, look, I'm not sure what else I'm going to be able to do. Take a little bit of a break, maybe come back, give your body some more time, we can try again. This was really hard because we thought, gosh, this thing that people always talk about IVF, it's like this light at the end of a very dark tunnel where if nothing else works, at least that will. But then we were stuck in the place where that potentially wasn't even an option for us. So we decided to do a little bit of research. I went and met with a few other doctors. I worked with a wonderful fertility naturopath for a few months. And we found a doctor who said, look, I don't really like the protocol they did with that last cycle. I think I can help you. So we did one more cycle. And this time we ended up with one embryo. I couldn't believe it. We actually got one little embryo out of that cycle. And I knew that was progress, and I thought perhaps we'd have to do a few cycles to really get anywhere. But I couldn't believe it. That little embryo made it all the way. And my little girl is now 7 years old. She was a fighter from day one, and she still is. So that was my first fertility journey. And my husband and I are both only children. We had always talked about having 2 kids. We just didn't want the same situation that we had growing up where we were only kids. And we thought, well, okay, well, this whole IVF thing, it did work. We'll go back to that doctor and we'll do it again. It'll be fine. But then the most amazing thing happened. When my daughter was 1, I stopped breastfeeding and my cycle returned. I went to the bathroom one day and my period had just showed up, and I thought, okay, this is some kind of weird postpartum bleeding, surely. But no, came back the next month and the one after that, and I couldn't believe it. And we were so excited. We thought, oh my goodness, this is the one thing we were missing that first time. We can actually try to have a baby now. It's going to be so much easier. But sadly, that is not how things worked out. And we went to my GP, my family doctor, and she was like, well, look, you are ovulating. Your hormone levels are not amazing for your age, but you're ovulating. There's no reason you can't just try naturally at home. So go for it. So we did. We tried for about 6 months. Nothing happened. So we went back to the doctor and she said, well, we'll try a few letrozole cycles, which induces ovulation. There's the chance that you'll ovulate more than one egg. And she gave me a bit of progesterone to support my cycle as well, because it was on the shorter side. So we did about 5 or 6 rounds of that. And again, nothing worked. So it was about another year of trying. We went back to the doctor and she said, look, let's run a few more tests because there's no reason why this shouldn't be working. So we found out we had a whole bunch of new fertility issues that we didn't know that we had before, or that weren't an issue before. So we found out I had a thyroid condition. My fallopian tubes were partially blocked. We went for the Hycosi scan. The fluid was not moving through the tubes very easily, so she thought there was potentially blockage through both of them. We found out my husband had some male factor issues, nothing like majorly problematic, but very sub-average. So all of these things together really created like a cocktail of things that weren't really working. My FSH levels were very high. My AMH levels were almost 0. And it was around this time I developed chronic insomnia. It was so debilitating. It was every single night I would just lay there for hours and hours and hours. It impacted every little part of my life. So we were referred back to IVF with all of these conditions going on. And I look back now and I think, she put me on sleeping tablets. I was alternating them with anti-anxiety medication. I was taking thyroid medication, meds to ovulate and meds to support my cycle. It's no wonder I wasn't getting pregnant. I look back now,
Yeah.
my body was just in survival mode. It was full on.
Yeah.
So we went back and did a round of IVF and couldn't believe this, Alyssa. We got two perfect embryos
Wow.
from this cycle. We were like, oh my goodness, we're going to have twins. This is sweet. Our family is like done. But sadly, neither of those embryos stuck. And we had transferred both of them. And the day we found out we weren't pregnant was about middle of March 2020. And we went into lockdown the day after we found out. So then the clinics all closed down. For anyone who was going through IVF in 2020 would know, IVF was considered non-essential surgery, so there was no option to try again. And we thought, well, that's kind of it. That's kind of done. No, I was 37 by this stage, and I was told my chances of conceiving through IVF were about 5% and naturally like non-existent. So that was a pretty dark time for me. I think that was probably my lowest point, my point of crying on the bathroom floor at 3 o'clock in the morning and just thinking, I've done everything and I did everything perfectly. Like I got 100% on that fertility test. I tell you what, like I did the 20 supplements. I did the acupuncture 3 times a week. I did the hypnosis. I went for walks every day. I was doing my meditations. Like I did everything perfectly. And I couldn't believe that nothing was working. It was around this time that a friend of mine said, Jen, I know this girl who is a yoga teacher and she specializes in fertility yoga. Do you want to speak to her? I had been a Pilates teacher for about 15 years at this stage, but I was never a yoga teacher until this point. And I was like, look, I'm in lockdown. I can't go to work. I can't do anything. I've literally tried everything else. What's a bit of yoga? Let's throw it into the pile. Why not? Let's give it a go. And so I met with this beautiful woman based in Australia, and without sounding too dramatic, it changed my life completely. And I sort of approached it from the perspective of, all right, well, maybe this will get me pregnant after nothing else has. But it was things started to change in my life that really threw me. After a couple of weeks of practicing consistently, I started sleeping again. I would just I remember I woke up one morning, I was like, why do I feel different? I hadn't taken sleeping tablets and I had had a proper night's sleep.
Nice.
It was bizarre. I think I was a bit nicer to my husband. I'd wake up in the morning. I think he was, noticing I was a bit less crabby with him. And then about a month after that, I had to go regularly to get my thyroid checked. And my thyroid started to rebalance. And I hadn't changed my meds. I hadn't changed anything at all. And then in July of 2020, I fell pregnant at home on my own.
Wow.
Well, with my husband, but, without any medical intervention. And we were blown away. We couldn't believe that this had happened after everything. And we went to the doctor, we got the pregnancy confirmed, my HCG levels were rising, everything was looking great. They put me on progesterone just to help me support my cycle, support the pregnancy just in case. And we thought everything was like we were done. That was the end of our journey. But sadly, we lost that baby at 8 weeks. And it was one of those awful moments of, I'm sorry, there's no heartbeat. And having to go through all of that after everything that we'd been through. And I couldn't believe that we'd gotten to this point. And don't get me wrong, this was a very, very difficult time. And I couldn't get out of bed. I struggled to be a parent. I struggled so much with secondary infertility and all of the things that go along with that, the guilt, the shame. But there was something playing at the back of my mind, and I knew I could do it again. And I just had this feeling that I had stumbled upon something that no doctor had told me was an option or that was possible. And I wanted to know why. I wanted to learn how it had had such a huge impact on my life. So I went and retrained as a yoga teacher. And I dove into my training. It was really humbling, someone who'd been doing, practicing Pilates for such a long time, and I had a strong exercise science background. It was so different, and I loved learning again. So I found a school that specialized in women's health and fertility yoga, and I dove into all of that. I started putting all the principles into my own life, and in the very, very end of 2020 in December, I felt pregnant again at home. And my little boy is now 4. So
Mm,
that is my journey, and that is why I decided to create the work that I do, because there is so much that we have access to that no one tells us. And I've
mhm.
decided it's just my job to show women how capable they are.
That's fantastic. I love that. It's definitely something I've learned along my own journey. And you and I have had such parallel journeys in so many ways, the IVF and miscarriage and, you know, all the ups and downs. And absolutely, it's something that's been, I know, very powerful on my own journey is just coming to the understanding of how beautifully capable our bodies are of healing if we really give them the space that they need and the nourishment and all of the things. So I love how you talk about that and huge congratulations on being able to bring both of your beautiful babies into the world and in very different ways, but just it all comes into place exactly as it needs to be, right?
Does. And before I had kids, I had planned I was going to be one of those like, yummy mummies, and I was going to have my kids 2 years apart, and I'd have
Yeah.
a latte in one hand, pram in the other hand. And I look back now, and I was 39 when I had my son. And not in a
Mhm.
million years did I think I'd be having a baby when I was almost
Oh yeah.
40. But it just doesn't matter. But not for a moment do I look at my kids and think, I wish you were closer together, or I wish my journey had worked out a different way. It's easy for me to say that in hindsight. I completely get that. But there is a lot of power in being able to say, well, things happened when they were meant to happen.
Absolutely. And the beauty of it is that the journey that you went to, again, very similarly to me, is what led you to doing the beautiful work that you do now and being able to share that with the world. And there's absolutely a gift in that. So I love that.
Thank
Yeah.
you. I
Yeah.
agree.
I similarly had thought, I'm going to be done having kids by the time I'm 30. I'm going to do it early and be done. And now I'm 36 and pregnant with my first. So
It's just how things work out, right?
it is, but it's all in perfect timing. So I'm
Mm.
I'm very thankful. So I would love to hear more about fertility yoga. You were talking about that and how powerful it was for you. Now, I'm a yoga instructor myself and have been doing that for many years, but fertility yoga honestly is something that's fairly new on my radar. I hadn't really heard much about it until fairly recently. So I would love if you can share just a little bit about what that is, how that is different from quote unquote regular yoga and what that looks like as you're supporting women through fertility journeys with yoga.
And it's funny you say that. I have so many students who are yoga teachers that say the exact same thing. I've been a yoga teacher for so many years, but I don't really understand how fertility yoga works. And it's lovely to be taught by someone else, when it's your job. It's lovely for someone else to hold that space for you. So as you said, fertility yoga, look, it's not something I've made up or anyone else has made up. It's not some fancy form of new yoga that anyone's invented. But the way that it's different from quote unquote normal yoga is that we match the practices to each phase of the menstrual cycle. So, what we do during menstruation is very different to what we do at ovulation. So, for example, when you are bleeding, this is a time where we really lean into rest. We do a lot of restorative work, really gentle movement to help release the body, allow the body to release all of the buildup from the previous month. And of course, if you're trying to conceive, this can be a very emotionally charged time as well. So, we really want to lean into our practices here that help us feel held and supported. Then, as we move out of the menstrual phase, we come into the follicular phase and then up to ovulation. So, generally about sort of 10 to 14 days worth. And this is a time where your hormone levels are starting to rise, your energy levels are starting to rise, and we match the practices to support that. I can talk a little bit about how it has a physiological impact on the body a little bit later. But basically, we see a lot more of those vinyasa flow style practices where there's a lot of coming up to standing and then coming back down to the mat, moving the spine in all planes of direction, a lot of hip openers, and it really increases circulation and blood flow throughout the body. Then as we get to ovulation, we also do some practices to pull that energy downwards to really encourage that sort of, that opening of the hips and that allowing of that ovulation to happen and support that within the body. And then after ovulation, if you are trying to conceive, one of two things are happening. Either you are pregnant and your body is gearing up to do the biggest job it has ever done in its life, or you're sadly not pregnant and it's getting ready to bleed once again. In both of those situations, we support the body in the same way. So we want to, if you're pregnant, support implantation, encourage good circulation and blood flow, which we know is crucial for supporting early pregnancy. But we want to really pair the practices back in terms of how energetic or intense they are. And this allows us to really come into that sense of regulating the nervous system, which is incredibly important. We can talk a little bit about why as well. And that's important for everyone of every day of their life to be able to regulate your nervous system, but it is especially important if you are trying to conceive. And so that's how we sort of match the practices. And then there's a lot of other things that we can do dependent on what particular fertility concerns you have going on. If you don't have a regular cycle or you've got a missing period altogether, maybe if you've got PCOS and you're finding that connection between the brain and the ovaries is not quite as strong as it should be. Same if you have lower AMH or high FSH levels. So we can really wake up the endocrine system and kind of get that connection going again as much as we can. So that's a sort of a brief outline as to how it's sort of different to normal yoga.
Awesome. Thank you for that. That's super helpful. And I love the idea of just connecting where you are in your cycle with what you're doing with your body. I think that's so important and one of those things that's probably a little under talked about in the world of fertility and just women's health in general. I know I used to be more of an advocate of just go, 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 do all the things all the time. And yeah, when I finally learned that, oh, my body actually isn't the same all throughout my cycle, there's a lot that's changing. And when I actually learned to work with that instead of trying to fight it and just push through all the time, wow, look how much better that feels.
It does. It blows my mind. And I was in my late 30s when I learned about all this stuff. I'm now 43 and I still tailor my life around this idea of I rest during my period, energy builds up, and then we tone it down a bit after ovulation. I'm no longer trying to conceive. But at 43, as someone who was diagnosed with having gone through early menopause 10 years ago, I now have a more regular, healthy, consistent cycle than I ever did in my 20s and 30s. And I think that is a huge part in this ability to recognize what your body needs at each phase of the cycle. So it's huge. Thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you mentioned how all of this helps to support your nervous system and how important it is to support your nervous system while you're trying to conceive, which I think is another one of those things that we probably don't talk about enough. We were talking about just earlier how it's it's for many people it's so focused on the physical body and just, what do we need to do to get you ovulating or get your cycles regular? We're very focused on the physical body, but the nervous system, nobody talked to me about that. I mean, that was something I kind of discovered on my own many years into my fertility journey. But yeah, I would love if you can touch on that a little bit. Just why is your nervous system important to pay attention to when you're trying to conceive or really anytime, and how the fertility yoga helps to support that?
I would love to. I'm so passionate about this. I feel like I bang on about it all day, every day, but the more people that hear this, the better. And it isn't something that your doctor's going to tell you about. Like, what doctor is asking you, what's your relationship like? What are your stress levels like? How are you coping at work? Are you able to maintain your friendships and your relationships at this time? Like, your nervous system creates your entire experience within the world. And if things are not regulated and your body is in this survival mode, your life becomes very, very difficult. And as I mentioned, I have an exercise science background. So when I fell pregnant naturally for the first time, I wanted to know why. I wanted to tell me the scientific reason why this happened when doctors told me it wasn't possible. So I think that's where a lot of the research that comes into regulating the nervous system came up. So you are not meant to be go, go, go. Every point of the day, 24 hours a day. You're not meant to be, waking up and checking your phone first thing and then having all of like the world's news bombarding your nervous system. And then throughout the day, you are contactable at every single second of the day. And the last thing we do when we go to sleep is we're scrolling our phone. Like, it is too much for our nervous systems, which are incredibly highly evolved over millions and millions of years. And we think we're so clever. We think, we build cities and we can go to the moon and we can do all these things. But our nervous systems have not caught up with our modern lives. And there's nothing that you can do about that in terms of your physiology. So when you're in this state of, well, I'm so worried about this upcoming IVF cycle, or I'm terrified that I'm not going to be pregnant again this month. And if this embryo transfer doesn't work, then I don't know what that means. Are we going to have to remortgage the house to pay for more? Like all of the things that go through your mind when you are struggling with fertility bring your body into a state of fight or flight. And sadly, your nervous system doesn't understand the difference between I'm terrified that this IVF cycle isn't going to work and there's a tiger in the next room. And when I open the door, it's about to come and attack me and kill me. Literally, your nervous system thinks that this is a life or death situation, even though it's not when you're going through IVF or any kind of fertility challenges, right? But your poor body is going to react in the same way. So we either go into fight, which is the very type A approach that I took, which was like, I'm going to fight this. I'm going to do everything right. I'm going to take the 50,000 supplements. I'm going to be perfect. Everything's going to work because I'm going to make it work. And that sense of desperate control. Or we go into flight, which is sort of like that panic mode, and everything gets very overwhelming and we just find like it's all too much. And then we end up often going into freeze or into shutdown, which is that dorsal state, which is your nervous system basically says, I don't think we can fight this danger. I don't think that we're going to be able to run from it. So what I'm going to do is numb you from the pain so you don't have to experience what's going on. And that's where we end up in places of apathy and hopelessness and depression. It's where we find it really hard to maintain relationships and do all of the things that we used to find enjoyable. We lose our ability to feel the wide variety of emotions, whether it's anger or sadness, but also joy and excitement as well. And people say to me all the time, well, people get dressed and get pregnant every day. And yes, absolutely. We know women in war zones fall pregnant. Sure. Women who are in abusive relationships fall pregnant. But I think you can approach this at two ways. Like, is that the way you want to get pregnant? Do you want to come at it from, do you want to be in survival mode when you get pregnant and just that's your pregnancy and that's your new motherhood experience? Because that was the first experience that I had. And I think it set me up for a much more difficult path to conceiving the second time around. The second thing I say to people is, you might be able to get pregnant, with all of this stress going on, but it makes your life miserable. And when you're in that constant state of fight or flight, day after day for months or years at a time, it has real physiological impacts on your health. Usually the first thing we notice is that digestion is impacted. People either end up not going to the bathroom at all, or they have diarrhea and they're constantly going. We find that the critical thinking part of your brain, that prefrontal cortex, it literally goes offline. You do brain scans of people who are in fight or flight, and we see that there's not a lot of brain activity going on. So, you can't focus at work. You're like, oh, I forgot this. I can't remember that. It gets really hard to think clearly. We notice our immune system suffers, so you get sick more easily. The other thing that your body doesn't need when you are in fight or flight is reproduction. Because if you're running from a tiger, your brain's not going to say, I really think it's a good idea if we have a baby right now. And that sounds very simplistic, but I see this over and over again, Alyssa. My students would come to me and they'll say, I used to have a 28-day cycle. I would ovulate right in the middle. It was super predictable. I had no PMS. Fast forward a year or two into this journey of trying to conceive, their cycle is all over the place. They don't ovulate regularly. They've got a really short luteal phase. They might have awful PMS symptoms. And a lot of that comes down to cortisol production. Yeah. Cortisol steals from your body's ability to make progesterone and steals from your body's ability to synchronize all of the other sex hormones that we have. So the practices that we can then offer ourselves, and you don't have to do yoga. Like I'm a yoga and meditation and breathwork teacher, so that's what I talk about. So obviously that's what I come back to, and I find they're incredibly effective. But you don't have to do yoga, but you have to do something to bring your body out of this. And you need to find something that is consistent and you do it on a regular basis, because it's not a one and done thing. I'm not going to go do yoga today and my brain is going to be like, cool, I'm back to regulation. I feel like everything's fine. It's something that we're going to need to come back to every single day. And whether that looks like 5 minutes of breath work, whether it's 10 minutes of meditation, whether it's going for a walk in nature and feeling the sun on your skin, or maybe you've got the time to roll out your yoga mat and do a 30-minute practice, whatever it is, we need to find ways to consistently remind the body that it's safe. And that's where change starts to happen. That was a very long answer. I hope that that made sense.
No, that was a perfect answer. I love the way you brought that around there. That was, yeah, I think that was were all words that we needed to hear. And I really want to highlight what you were saying at the end there, that your body feeling safe is such an important piece of it, because at the end of the day, our physical bodies respond to signals from the brain, from the nervous system. And exactly what you said, it doesn't understand the difference between a physical threat or just this psychological stress that we experience. And anybody who's been through a fertility journey of any kind, I'm sure, can attest to the emotional range that goes on, the psychological just stress and worry and anxiety, and all of these things absolutely have an impact on your physical body over time. I know that was as you were talking through this, I was like, I feel like you're describing me to a T. Just the started off with some gut issues and then some cycle issues started coming in and just all kind of piled on top of each other. And, the nervous system piece is something I started to learn about much later, but definitely would have been helpful earlier on in my fertility journey as well. So hopefully people can catch this and learn about all of this sooner than later, right? And not have to go through quite so many years of stress and anxiety leading up to that.
Oh, that would be my dream, and I wish I had learnt about all of these
Mhm.
things earlier on because I wasn't in menopause.
Yeah.
I didn't need IVF. And, I would never take that back because IVF gave me my beautiful daughter. But to think that I just needed to learn another way
Mhm.
is something that I don't think we're even taught to consider.
Yeah.
So it's important.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think so many of us once we're told that we have to go through IVF, I know that this was my mentality and mindset, and maybe it was similar for you, where it was just, oh well, there's there's no going back from that now. If I hadn't gotten pregnant
Mm,
by that time when we decided to go into IVF, then clearly my body just can't do that. It's not possible for me. I'm never going
mm.
to get pregnant naturally. And, for both of us, that ended up not being the case. So,
Absolutely.
yeah,
And I just want to point out, obviously, fertility treatments are overcoming medical conditions in a
sure.
lot of ways. So we not for a moment want to discount that you might need to do IVF.
Yeah.
I do think it's heavily overused, and I do think that doctors don't really investigate the underlying causes of fertility
Yeah.
issues in the way that, they potentially could. And it's a very big business, and that's a topic for another day. But,
Absolutely.
you know, but even if you are going through IVF, it is so important to be able to support yourself on another level. Not just I've got to do the injections, I've got to do the appointments, it's what else can I do to support me at this
Hmm.
time? So, so important.
Totally. Yeah, these things can totally work hand in hand, because
Mm,
you're right. There absolutely are situations where maybe there's something physical going on where your body's not going to be able to conceive naturally. That absolutely can happen as well. And I think I'm so thankful that IVF is even a possibility, because it does give hope and possibility for so many people who might otherwise have not had options. So I'm so glad that that is an option for people. But like you said, you can absolutely do both at the same time, and you'd have that support from both ends too. So I think that's beautiful. Now, I would love to, you've mentioned, and we've kind of had some conversations around just the emotional, psychological impacts behind infertility. I would love to even dig into that a little bit more, because that's something that you talk about a lot, is just the ongoing impacts of going through infertility and even the trauma that you can experience as a result of just that wanting to get pregnant, not being able to get pregnant, going through all the buildup leading to IVF and then having it be unsuccessful or having a miscarriage. I mean, there's so many different routes that people end up taking along the way. I would love if you can dig into that a little bit more, just what that can look like for people, and again, how we can support ourselves if you are going through that journey.
It's an important one to talk about because we don't talk about it. And I think when we think about trauma, what we bring to mind is returning war veterans and people who have been through car accidents or disasters and, victims of abuse. And all of these are very traumatic experiences. But we don't really know what the definition of trauma is. And I think that going through all of these difficult things when you're trying to conceive, and IVF cycles that aren't successful, and even just month after month of trying, and then you throw in pregnancy loss. This is textbook to PTSD and trauma. And I have students who say things like, I can't even get out of the car to go back into the clinic where I was told my baby had died. That is the definition of trauma, when it is impacting your life. You can't function normally. Basically, trauma is anything that was too much or too overwhelming for the nervous system. And your body says, I'm going to protect you and do whatever I can so that you don't have to feel that thing again. And so the problem with a traumatic experience, so whether it is whatever it might be, you've lost embryos, or just the ongoing, it's the 1,000 cuts, isn't it? Is, as much as a single punch. And your brain gets to this point where memories can trigger that fight or flight response. And that's really problematic, because you can be going about your daily life and going for a beautiful walk in nature, and you've got your partner with you and you're safe, but you just remember the things that you've been through and you go into fight or flight because of that memory. That's a real problem, because again, we have all of those flow-on impacts from the release of cortisol and adrenaline. And again, your body doesn't know that it's not under threat. So you have to find ways of addressing that. And this is where I think it's incredibly important that you work with someone who is trauma trained and trauma informed, because sometimes the answer is we need calming and regulating practices to help us feel safe. But sometimes we need the opposite. We need more energetic and uplifting and regulating practices to kind of pull us out of those sort of more shut down and dorsal states. So it's something that I think I didn't really understand the impact of until after my children were born. And I don't know that I don't know what it's like to have your kids easily. So I didn't have anything to compare it to. But there was a few moments where I was like, I don't think this is normal. I'd be pushing my son down the street in his pram, and I would constantly be looking up at the sky, just checking if anything was going to fall on his pram and kill him. And like this obsession with checking my kids were breathing before I went to bed, and just this catastrophizing, like if I was not with my children, if my husband had taken them out and I was by myself, I was expecting this phone call that they'd been killed in a car accident, just these constant things. I was like, I don't think this is normal. So I did a lot of research and training, and I went back again and actually retrained as a somatic yoga teacher and a trauma-informed yoga teacher to really understand what trauma does to the body. And, if you live in this state for months and years at a time, this is where we see real health impacts. We see people who were abused as children having autoimmune conditions as adults, and, chronic insomnia for years and years at a time. And it is something that we really want to address, but it's very nuanced, and it doesn't have to be a dramatic thing. It's not like you need to go and, make an appointment with this, trauma specialist straight away, but it is about finding little ways to really, again, as we said before, help your body feel safe consistently. That has a huge impact. For me, the biggest impact was finding breath work. Finding transformative breath work was something that I found incredibly powerful. It's not something that I do with my students if they're in their 2-week wait. It's something I would only do with them if I know they're definitely not pregnant, because it's quite intense practice. But for that, I find it can really unlock a lot of these layers of trauma that we've been holding on to, and allow your body to process them. Because we think that we can think our way out of these things, but you can tell yourself all day long, I'm fine, I'm not stressed, I've had my baby, there's nothing to worry about, I'm all good. But your body doesn't understand words or language. Your body only understands safety, and that's what we need to allow it to find.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love how you talk about it's about finding what works best for you, right? Because there are so many different tools out there, yoga and breath work and meditation and EFT tapping, and I mean there's so many different ways. Somatic work is a beautiful tool as well, but it's not that you have to do everything all at once, because I think a lot of women stress themselves out with that too, like, oh, I'm not doing this one, I'm not doing this one, maybe I need to add.
Mm.
It's exactly what you were saying before. It's that idea of wanting to do everything perfectly and do all the things, but sometimes what happens is that we end up then stressing ourselves out of just, gosh, now I have to carve out 3 hours a day to fit all these practices in. But it's
So
about
relatable.
finding what really works for you and resonates with you and finding ways to sprinkle that in. And I think with that, because I know I get this question sometimes, and maybe you do as well, of just, well, what do I do then? Like,
Mm.
which one do I try? And it may require a little experimentation, but what I really find is just what really resonates with you when you practice this certain modality. How do you feel afterwards? Because that's going to give you your answer more than anything else. It's that, what does that actually feel like after you've completed that practice? Do you feel better? Do you feel lighter? Do you feel freer? Do you feel those emotions vibrating on a higher scale? That's really how you're going to answer that question, is to try things and figure out what really works.
Mm. Oh, I relate to that so much because, again, when I started this fertility yoga practice, I was like, well, it's going to be one more thing I have to make sure I carve out an hour to do. And goodness, I already carved out so much time for so many appointments. I was like, here's another thing I have to do. But it took me by surprise how much it didn't require that. And some days my yoga practice looked like 5 minutes of meditation, and that's okay. I think there's this misconception that a yoga practice is the physical exercises that you see on a yoga mat, but actually there are 8 components, or what we call 8 limbs, that make up a yoga practice, and the asana, or the physical practice, is one of them. But the other things include meditation and breath work and your connection to yourself and your higher purpose, and things like the way you treat others and the way you treat yourself. So all of that is a yoga practice. So just taking care of yourself, going to bed at a good time, and, getting yourself up in the morning and seeing the sunlight and eating nourishing foods, like that is a yoga practice. And I
Mhm.
think that's what really surprised me, that it didn't have to be an hour on my mat every day. It was a different way of approaching my life that really, really stood out to me.
That's a beautiful way to say it. A different way of approaching your life. Yeah. I
Mm.
I resonate with that 100%. I
Yeah,
love that
not
so
like
much.
this is going to get me pregnant, but this makes me feel good.
Yeah.
And that is like my core message, honestly.
Yeah. Oh, love that. Well, thank you so much, Jen, for sharing everything with us today. This has just been such a beautiful, powerful message, and I hope that this can reach so many women who are struggling with their own fertility journeys, because I know that you and I are so not alone in this. Unfortunately, there are so many women in the world who experience fertility journeys in so many different ways. So I thank you so much for taking the time to be here today and share your message and your own journey. Now, I know you have some upcoming events in your own journey, your own practice. So I would love to hear what that is, what you're offering, what you're sharing with people. And of course, we'll be sure to link all of this in the show notes as well.
Thank you, Alyssa. If you found this conversation interesting, if you're listening to this and you're like, okay, I really would like to learn more, come and join me at the end of this month. I'm going to be running a free 3-day live fertility yoga series. This is something that I run usually once or twice a year, so it won't be running again for quite a while. And it's completely free. So you can come along. We have about 75 minutes together each day, and I will take you through different fertility yoga practices. They are safe no matter where you are in your cycle or if you're going through treatments. I'm going to go through some guided meditations and some breathwork practices with you. And what I like to offer people is, like, it's this way of putting things in your toolbox. So you can go, okay, I really like that. That felt really good for me. I'm going to put that in my toolbox. And that really worked. And I'm going to bring that out again when I need it. And you get the replays of all of the sessions, so you can go and use them again when you need them. And it's a wonderful way for you just to come and, be around other women who get it. And, we have women from 6 different continents that I work with, which is wild to me. I absolutely love that technology allows for these things to happen. But just to be held in the energy of other women who understand what you're going through is enormous. And you can ask me all your questions. I would love to meet you. You get a couple of little free gifts when you sign up to join that free 3-day series. If you found the practices helpful after we go through this, you will have the opportunity to jump into my program, which I open after the series concludes. And that's something that I explain in a little bit more detail as we go as well. So I will give you the link. And if you've got any questions in the meantime, you can find me on Instagram. I am Jen, Element Pilates Yoga, also on TikTok and YouTube as well. So if you want to reach out to me, I am always available. My DMs are open. I respond to all my messages. So I would love to hear from you.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. And definitely check that out. That sounds like just such an amazing free, that is hard to say, free 3-day.
I do struggle.
But that sounds absolutely amazing. Definitely go and check that out. And you can reach out to Jen and connect and hear all the wonderful things. So thank you again so much for being here today. I really am honored to have you here on the podcast. I've absolutely loved just following your journey and hearing everything that you have to share. I just really resonate with your message. So huge thank you for being here today. And thank you to everyone for joining us.
Thank you, Alyssa. It's been such an honor.
Great. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in to Aligned to Rise. If this episode spoke to you, take a moment to share it with a friend who needs this message too. And then don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. I'll see you next time, my friend. Let's rise together.